Good afternoon, everyone, and isn't it a beautiful day here in Charleston? The weather's going to be beautiful, allow for a little cleanup to occur, and for everyone to enjoy a nice Labor Day weekend. But as we always do when we have a weather event like we have over the last couple of days, we always look at those ways we can always improve ourselves and even do a better job, even though we feel like we've had good practice over the years in preparing for and responding to significant weather events, tropical storms and hurricanes particularly. And I think in a way we're really blessed. We really dodged a bullet again with the impacts of tropical storm Idalia. The wind and the rain impacts were pretty minimal. The exception is that combination of tide and storm surge. We had flooding in our city last night, and we're going to speak to you all a little more in detail about that in a few minutes. That did create a little cleanup, so we got some street sweeping going on right now. Thanks to our Public Services Department, we got all our City of Charleston street sweepers out, and thanks to the town of Somerville and Berkeley County, and I think a few others may chip in. They're going to add some street sweepers to our efforts here later today and over the weekend. Road-wise, we closed over 51 streets last night, but notably the Septima Clark Parkway was open, and that's a result of our drainage tunnel project at Fishburne being completed with phase 4, and it's working. It's working. We did not have to close the crosstown last night, so that's an accomplishment. I would like to thank our citizens for their fine cooperation and for the most part staying put last night and staying home and staying safe. That really made it better for everyone, because public safety, y'all, is number one. And I'm happy to report that as far as we know, no one was hurt in the storm last night, and that's of paramount importance. That's number one. And so to give us a little report further on that, I'm going to call on our police chief, Cheeto Walker, to bring us up to date. Cheeto?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to extend my gratitude to the 239 officers and other city staff assigned to various aspects of our response. Their dedication and commitment did not go unnoticed. We had a total, like the mayor said, 51 road closures throughout the city. All roadways that were closed as a result of flooding are now open. And more importantly, like the mayor said, we had no significant incidents or injuries reported that were storm related. Let this serve as a reminder that we may not always be this fortunate with storms, but preparation and communication remain critical to our public safety efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. And likewise, I'd like to call on Chief Dan Courier to give us a report on the activities of our fine firefighters. Chief?
Good afternoon. First off, I'd like to echo what's already been said and thank the firefighters, the police officers, and all the city staff who worked through the storm. It's the coordination and it's the attitude to get things done for this city that really carries us forward, and it's admirable. For the fire department, we had a 30% increase in call volume over what we expect to see in a given day. Within that call volume, we had 22 water rescues, predominantly removing people from vehicles in flooded areas. Most of the activity for the department was between the hours of 7 p.m. and midnight. We did have one firefighter suffer a non-life-threatening injury, and aside from just small issues with apparatus and facilities, the fire department is up and running.
Great, thank you, Chief. And our new, I say new, relatively new emergency management director, Ben Almquist, really did a terrific job leading the team. He was our incident commander most of this event. Ben, you want to give us a recap of any emergency department items. Ben?
Thank you, sir. This morning, we returned to operating condition 3, that's normal operations. Right now, our focus is on the transition phase. That's where we conduct our damage assessment and our debris management, getting ready for any recovery operations that we might have. We'll coordinate that with the county and the state to make sure that everybody's on the same page to determine if there's any FEMA assistance coming our way. As everybody has said already, we really had a fantastic performance by all city staff and also by the citizens, listening to our message, adhering to warnings. That's exactly what we want. The things that we could control, we did control. And given the circumstances with the weather, the tide, we really had the best case turnout for this.
Thank you, Ben. So, last evening when I went home briefly, I felt really great. I rode around the city, and as is always my goal, before a storm comes to town, is that Charleston looks like a ghost town. Nobody's on the street, nobody's out driving around, and people are home safe before the storm comes. And as I said, thankfully, we really didn't have that big of a wind or rain event last night. But what we had was the combination of what had already been predicted, a super blue moon tide. A week ago, we were saying it was going to be an 8-foot tide. As it turned out, with the wind pushing and the storm surge, we had a 9.23 foot tide. Now that 1.23 feet makes a big difference in the low country. It's about 14 or 15 inches. And that was just enough to completely cover some whole neighborhoods of our city, particularly on the peninsula, with water. And interestingly enough, y'all, listen to this. That 14-inch differential between the storm and no storm is about the same differential that we predict will be an everyday occurrence in the city of Charleston in the year 2050, with an additional 14 or 15 inches of sea level rise that NOAA and all the experts are predicting. So I'm going to call to the podium here Dale Morris to share some insights of our proposed perimeter plan for the peninsula and what a difference it would have made in just what we saw last night. And I'll add that I went down, after I went home, I was in Charleston Village, and then I went downtown near the Battery and took my own little video of the water coming up King Street from the Battery. And it was like a little river of water just being pushed into the city. And the whole difference was having that perimeter protection completed around our city. Dale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city has installed over 40 check valves. These are things that go into the pipes around the city, drainage in West Ashley, James Island, mostly on the peninsula, because that's where the hard infrastructure drainage is. We've installed over 40 of those over the last number of years. They all worked. The water did not come up those pipes. The water did not come up those pipes and into the city. The city is also, we put pumps out. We have permanent pumps that are working. We're upsizing some of those. And we put temporary pumps out where the water collects in the city from rainfall. They work too. The fact of the matter is we saw flooding across the city. Some of it was from this intense rainfall we had in bursts yesterday, but we didn't have much rainfall, all things considered, over a period of 12 hours, 2 to 3 inches, depending on where you are. That water drained out pretty quickly because it wasn't constant. It was intense but not constant, so that's good. What you saw here is the convergence last night of the astronomical or monthly high tide with max peak storm surge driven by Hurricane Idalia, Tropical Storm Idalia. We didn't have strong winds yesterday. They were an average 30 miles an hour. These weren't strong. They were persistent but not strong. But offshore, they're pushing the surge at us, coinciding with this high tide. Those normal astronomical high tides, they come in between 7.5 feet mean level water and 8 foot mean level water. That's generally what happens, and they occur once a month. Sometimes we get, 2 or 3 of them because they last a couple days. Now let's add 14 inches of sea level rise to that, because that is what's coming at us. There is just a strong amount of convergence in all the models for what's going to occur for sea level rise here, and that's 14 inches in the next 25 years. So if we add 14 inches of sea level rise to those tides, that are occurring once or twice or 3 times a month, means we're going to have a 9-foot, 2-inch normal tide. Now, that would be unmanageable for the city to go through this. Citizens would not stay here. The medical district would be in trouble. Businesses would be in trouble. So that's the challenge we have. What we have now with this project with the Army Corps of Engineers is the potential to design a structure around the margin of the peninsula that would help us manage this tide. If we would have had that structure in place last night and we'd have closed the tidal gates that would be part of that structure, the peninsula would have been dry. None of the damage that we're seeing now coming in the damage assessments would have occurred. The flooding on the streets on the peninsula would not have occurred. So we can choose to try to work with the Army Corps of Engineers to go forward with this project to see if we can design a beautiful but functional structure that protects the peninsula going forward. And that is something that I am I think it's very important that we at least try to do that. At the same time, we have to manage these issues off peninsula. So we have another project with the Army Corps of Engineers to help us look at tidal and inland flooding to help us manage those problems, those challenges out there, because the sea level rise is going to occur there and here. So just keep this in mind. We need this elevated edge around the peninsula, and we need to help the rest of the city too. But this is an essential thing to understand. If we do not like what happened last night, do we like it happening 2 or 3 times a month in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I just thought it was literally a perfect case in point last night to all the efforts that Dale, our stormwater resiliency teams, and the Corps of Engineers have been working on to protect our city long-term from the threats of storm surge, storm water, and from high tides. So I want to take one last minute and echo the thanks that have been given to the remarkable staff of the city of Charleston. I call them Team Charleston. They're really an amazing team of folks dedicated to protecting our city. I want to thank our partners, Charleston County, Berkeley County, the state of South Carolina. Governor McMaster called yesterday to make sure we had any resources that he could provide, and I followed up again with him this morning. So it really is a teamwork of not just our own City of Charleston staff, but with our partners as well. I thank our City Council for being supportive. Councilmember Shade, thank you again for being with us here today. But we have a remarkable team. We're going to keep this city safe and always thinking about ways to do a better job and think about ways to protect our city and for years and years and generations to come. With all that said, if anybody has any questions or comments, we'll try to field them. Yes, sir.
You're saying the crosstown never closed. I had a coworker that said at 8:30 p.m. last night at Courtney Drive that it was closed. Is that for a separate incident?
So, as a matter of fact, the crosstown itself was open. What happened is there was flooding on the West Ashley side, and so we did close down folks from being able to go across the bridge because we knew they were going to encounter a big a puddle of water as soon as they got across the river. And we reported, by the way, and requested from our South Carolina Department of Transportation help with elevating that ramp from Highway 61 where it splits off from the bridge. That's where tidal water often inundates the entire roadway. So last night the tide was so high that it didn't just inundate the ramp, but it came all the way over to the Waffle House. So to keep our citizens safe, we did in fact cut the end of it off. I guess you close the end of it off to prevent people from encountering that big puddle across the river.
And just one more thing. I was out at the Battery and I was also down at Denver manhole cover at Bindu, there's water coming up and flooding that area. That's not part of any of the drainage projects, is that correct?
I'd have to ask our stormwater folks to look specifically, but there are a few, I'll have to correct Dale on this one point. There are a few places where the check valves haven't covered every outfall possible around the whole city, and there are a few locations where some stormwater comes back up into the drain, so we'll need to check that one. Yes, sir. Anybody else? Well, all good. Well, thank you again for being with us today. Enjoy this beautiful weather. Help us get cleaned up a little bit if you can, and have a great Labor Day weekend to everyone. Thank you so much.
Is
Oh.
everything back to normal, open as usual for the city and everything today?
Actually, tomorrow morning, regular hours, we're open for business. Today, we are in a cleanup and recovery mode, so regular office functions are still closed today, and we'll be back in full force tomorrow. But we're in full force today, cleaning up and recovering from the storm. Thank you all for being with us.